All right, what's up, heads? Tourhead Nordy here with you. I've been putting up a lot of Big Steve stuff lately, but this interview is too goddamn good to pass up. Big Steve was talking to Sam Cutler on the phone. Sam was the Grateful Dead road manager from 1974 or 1970 to 1974, and of course, Big Steve was road crew and Jerry's manager from 69 all the way up to 95. But he called into Big Steve's show and they talked, and the stuff they talked about is fantastic. And even though, like I said, I've been putting up a lot of Big Steve lately, this one is way too good to miss. Listen all the way through, you guys. It's like 20 minutes long, but it's amazing. They talk about Jerry, the Hells Angels, the Rolling Stones, the Grateful Dead, the road, their personal stories. It's fantastic. So give it a listen and stick around till the end. All right, late.
I want you to remember the young ones, man. That's what we're really all here to help and put our love and soul out for them because they deserve it. I'm going to get to my caller now. And he is an amazing guy and an old friend of mine. And he's Sam Cutler. And okay, put Sam on to me, please.
Yay, Steve.
Hey, Sam. Thank you so
brother.
much for your patience, my brother.
No
I can't believe
No
it, how
problem.
long it took to get you
Well, man,
really
listen,
hooked up.
it's like rock and roll, isn't it? The core,
Right.
the core message of rock and roll is hurry up and wait.
Exactly.
We're pros at that stuff. No,
We
no
always
problem, man.
do
It's
that.
lovely to talk to you and great
Well,
to be on your program.
Thank you so much for being here. I know it's been difficult in ways for your health, but you are an inspiration to me, man. I follow what you go through, and right now, Sam, I got to tell you something. I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart because I think a lot about all of my life. And you saw in me when I was, hanging around, I was learning my trade, I was working at Alembic, I was on the scene. But you saw, and you let me step up onto the road. With your okay, I got to go.
Yeah,
and,
man.
and I thank you for that because you believed in me, and I hope
Hey,
you and I were a good team. We had so much fun together, and I love and
absolutely,
cherish
brother.
you. And
Well, I always, listen, man, with all the crew of the Grateful Dead, what I always looked at, because some of them, like you, were bloody giants. Others were small people, like Hagen, for example. You know what I mean?
Right,
I always looked at people's hearts, man, where
right.
people's hearts are at. And, when you got 12 people on the road, in a crew, everybody got to be together on every level, haven't they? You know what I mean? It's not just loving the band. You've got to get along together. And there were some tough old boys in the Grateful Dead crew. But everyone was, going in the one direction, support the band, support the music. I tell you what, honestly, and this is, I'm in 5 weeks' time, I'm 80 years old. The highlight of my life, Steve, absolutely, was the years I worked with the Grateful Dead.
I know it.
With the crew and with the band. That was the best part of my life. I think back on it with a great, emotion in a way, man. It's like, it's like remembering your first love affair kind of thing. It's one of those kind of very romantic things,
We were young and strong, and we conquered a lot of territory together, my friend. And your leadership was so important to me, man. You taught me so much of how to survive on the road, just because of your way of looking at life. You and I used to have philosophical conversations that we could talk. Some of the other guys maybe wouldn't go that deep, but you and I went deep about politics and life, and you helped guide me, when I was young, and it lasted me to this day. Yeah, so many great things have happened in my life.
As a tour manager, Steve, as a tour manager, you rarely get the opportunities that I had. I mean, like nobody's worked as a tour manager for the Rolling Stones and the Grateful Dead, but to go from the Rolling Stones to the Grateful Dead was like, going from one side of the spectrum to the other kind of thing. But the thing about when I joined the Grateful Dead was the Grateful Dead at that time needed somebody like me, what I call a psychedelic fascist. Somebody who was prepared to stand up and go, right, we're turning left here, then we're going right, and then we're going left again, you know what I mean? And didn't have any kind of problem with that stuff. I mean, later on, when I left the band, basically, it was because I felt like, what I could offer had been done. We'd gone from being broke after Lenny stole all that money.
Right.
You know, we had to work. I mean, we did 180 odd gigs in the first year.
Oh, man.
And we survived, and lived, as a band. And that in itself, was a great testament to the crew who worked their nuts off, man. You know what I mean? I never worked so hard in my life.
All of us did, and
that's for sure. Yeah.
You led that charge. We all looked up to you, and you were sort of a leader to the crew and the band. And a lot of people don't realize in those days, we'd walk into a hotel, remember, Holiday Inns usually, and they just throw the keys down, and we all grabbed them. You ended up rooming with everybody. So we all got to know each other's lives so deeply. We knew where we grew up. We knew everything.
I remember when I first joined the band, and I was sitting there talking with Garcia and Bobby and a couple of other people. And I said, well, what do you get for per diems? And they looked at me completely blank.
They didn't even know. There was nothing like that.
What are they? I said, yeah, it's the money that you have when you're on the road, you know what I mean, to survive.
Remember, you got us $10 a day. You got us $10 a day.
Right.
That was a big deal. That was a big deal.
And everybody was like, wow, And I kept saying to Jerry, don't just fucking buy tobacco. I used to buy cigarettes with it, right? Don't just buy tobacco, man. You got to eat with that. And he'd go and buy a burger, or something like that, if he remembered.
No, you taught us so much, man. No. You taught us so much about how to live on the road.
Well, it was a changing people's heads around and making people realize that, leadership.
Exactly.
If it's what you call it, from the right place, the right heart, if you like, wasn't a threat to the Grateful Dead. I mean, people like Rakow, rip off, and various other people
exactly
portrayed it as a threat to the ethos of the Grateful Dead. Not true. Listen, when the Grateful Dead are on stage, did you ever in the whole wide world ever see a band that had a leader like Jerry?
No, of course.
I mean, Jerry led from the front, musically, spiritually, whatever you like to call it, and was unafraid to do it. I mean, off stage, he was a bit weak, bless him, as we all loved him. You can't be.
He needed our strength. He relied on
department.
Excuse me for
he relied on
our strength when he wasn't on stage. He needed us. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and when he was on stage too. He was on stage too. He was like that. But you're right. He was the heart and soul. He was the heartbeat and soul of all of us. And
definitely.
He wouldn't be a leader. He didn't want to be a leader, but he couldn't help. He had to be. But you stepped in. I got to tell you, you stepped in, and it was chaos, man. Jonathan Reister was an erstwhile manager, road manager. He wasn't doing anything but joking around. And then when you came in, it was the first organization that stepped in. And so I really admired you for that. And I'm so glad you saw it in me. And I could be useful to you. Thank you for that.
And I had to deal with McIntyre. Doing the ignoring alien orders nonsense. But anyway, you know what, man? These things are
McIntyre didn't have your assets. You had different assets than he had, and he was not strong enough leadership, John. He led quietly, and so you knew how to do it just right.
It takes all kinds, but the fact of the matter is, as you well know, when you're on the road, it's absolutely unforgiving. You're going to be sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night, and you might be out on tour for a couple of months. You've got to look after yourself. I remember saying to Mickey one time, he had this big suitcase. I said, what have you got in that suitcase then? He said, all my supplies. So I said, well, let's have a look. I want to see. So he opened the suitcase, and there was all these packets of nuts and just the strangest looking stuff, right? Yeah, because in those days, see, there was no such thing as a vegetarian restaurant.
No, nothing.
You know what I mean? Now they're everywhere, and you got vegan restaurants and God knows what else. But
nobody was trying to be vegetarian. In our bunch, nobody was trying to be vegetarian. We were all eating steak, and we get it. But
that's what you needed. You need some protein, man, to lift all that shit.
Well, remember something, Sam? You and I hate to. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you and I.
No, go ahead.
we went out on tour. You can remember this. It was when very early on, and we went out with Hooterole, just you and me and Winslow and Jerry and Howard and that whole band. And you remember what happened in New York. I just want to tell this to the people out there because I wrote about it in my book. But if it hadn't been for you and me and our communication and our understanding, and you know what I'm talking about, we saved Jerry's life that day, man, because we knew you and I were able to think so quick and to understand what we were saying and how dire the situation was, but we didn't panic. If we'd have panicked, I thought about it later, Jerry might have been dead because that guy had a gun to his head, a bulleted gun.
That's right, man.
And we stood there, between him and that guy. Yeah. And then you slipped out at the right time and got us some help from our friends, you know. But I got to thank you for that. And I just think we were a great team doing that, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Listen, absolutely. Because you know what? We
don't brag about that. We both love Jerry. Bragged. Yeah, no, we sure did.
But one thing that we should do, credit where credit's due, because they're both dead now, but they're two wonderful men from the local chapter of the Hells Angels who came and helped.
Sandy and Vinny.
Sandy and Vinny. And Jerry owed his life as much to them as well. They were beautiful. And but you know what, Steve? Look, being on the road, of course, we all love our great successes and all that. But we had some things that weren't so great. I mean, nobody ever remembers. But you remember that guy Harvey Weinstein?
Oh, of course. Right? Buffalo. We got to work with him.
Doing all the girls. We had to work with him, and he was the guy that did the Buffalo gig, which was cancelled.
That's right.
And there was all kinds of weirdness behind it. So look, out of 100, 98% of the gigs we did were fantastic. Not least of which because the band we should remember.
You know who we were dealing with. I mean, most of the promoters were mobbed up, man, and all of them, those guys.
Sure.
And so in Buffalo, Harvey Weinstein worked with Corky, whose dad, remember Mr. D? Yeah. He was associated with Magaduccio, who was the boss of Buffalo.
The boss,
And so Weinstein, I remember him, you and I would have him running around. He'd be running around sweating to get us towels and water. We were trying to teach him how to be a promoter. And then he jumped off into Miramax right after that when he blew shows, you know. But yes, we met so many people. I mean, come on, I remember we were playing with Jerry's band at what's that theater, the Beacon Theater in New York, and you came in, you walked in with George Harrison to the dressing room, you know, and you and me and Jerry sat with George, and we had a great time with him, you know. That was a very memorable night, man.
Man,
we had a lot of fun.
I remember when we were playing in Philadelphia, and the head of the local mob was there in a white suit, and Sparky tipped a plate of spaghetti all over his head.
No, it wasn't Sparky, my friend. It was Ben Haller that did it because they were supposed to bring us steaks, and he dumped it on Alan Spivak, who was the promoter rep. Tell the rest. You tell the rest now what they did to us. Yeah. Slashed our tire. They slashed the tires on our semi, and we couldn't get a set of tires for 90 miles around. That was the mob, and they were pissed off, man. You bet. That guy, Alan Spivak, ended up going to jail for something else. It's really funny that you mentioned that. Because I was watching the United States Congress here was investigating Ticketmaster, and all the slimy sleazeballs that put it together were on there. And I was laughing. I said, we knew all those guys, man. And
we knew them when they started, right.
And the problem then was they were running monopolies all over, you know, and now they're just looking at it at Congress. It's so stupid. But politics, you and I, we could get into that for days, man.
Yeah, man. Listen, while I've got you on the phone, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
How's the kid? The last I
He's
saw
doing good. I talked to him yesterday. He had a massive stroke.
Give him my regards if he's listening. Love you, kid. Stay strong,
He doesn't listen, but I'll tell him. I'll tell him for you because I talk to him a lot. And he's really, you know, he's a little depressed because he can't walk and he's messed up. He had 3 strokes. But he is,
Wow.
I try to bring him up. I know that we sometimes talk and you get into griping about stuff. It's no good. I say, we got to keep it positive, and he knows that too.
Exactly, man.
But
Exactly.
he's
Good.
he lives such a life on the road, and then you're in these times where you're isolated or whatever like that. You have to draw on the best of your life, Sam, like to do.
Listen, like they say, old age is not for the faint-hearted. I mean, I've had cancer for 10 years. 10 years, mate. I've had lung cancer.
I know.
I'm not smoking. Needless to say, I don't smoke or drink. I haven't done it. In 5 weeks' time, I'm 80. But I give thanks. I'm still alive here, and life is good. I've got 2 beautiful sons. They're doing well, and it's lovely to talk to you. And let me send out a message to all the deadheads that are listening. For me, of course, well, not just because I was involved, but the period between 1970 and 74 was such a wonderful experimental period musically, but it was also an experimental period organisationally with the Grateful Dead, where we built, the crew of myself and the musicians built the model of how the Grateful Dead would operate, in effect, for the future. And so I'm very proud of the fact that the band went on to, first off, to survive, which was the number one requirement, but also, to do such memorable stuff musically and creatively. I mean, I've just been asked to participate in a film that they're doing on Watkins Glen. People forget that the largest and most successful gig in the history of the music business was actually happened because I was talking to Jerry, and me and Jerry were talking about doing a big outdoor gig, and I was saying, well, Altamont's 3 years ago. We can get this organised. If we organise it properly, there's no reason why it shouldn't be great. And we were bubbling along with the Allman Brothers, you know what I mean? I went to Woodstock to add the band, and that was one of the greatest shows ever. No one arrested.
It was the greatest show, Sam. But remember this: the best laid plans of mice and men fell apart. We got trapped in there the first day, never could get back out. The band had to come in on hitchhiking in, and we were building our PA right there at the spot. And you remember all the stuff that happened. The promoters like Kopic and Finkel, they were brand new, and Bill Graham was there. It was a whole. It was a big fucking deal to have the band there with us, and we spent 3 days all living in those trailers back there because nobody could leave. But you're right, it was special.
Classic,
and
man.
We didn't even know to put a roof on a stage in those days. And Woodstock and Altamont, all we learned at every place we did, man. And I was just watching stuff and learning. And
yeah, man. Well, I mean,
thank you for giving me a chance to be part of it, brother. You're great.
Hey, brother, listen, I love you too, Steve. And I tell you what, man, one thing about the Grateful Dead, which was magic, was, for example, at Watkins Glen, we're stuck there. We can't leave. Well, we might as well play. So Friday night, they played, and that was just so magic,
Remember that night?
I listened to recordings of it. Wow, what a night.
All in those little trailers, we were jammed in there with the guys from the band, the Allman Brothers, and our guys. Well, it was great. That was fabulous stuff, man. And friendships that lasted for years. Yes, sir. And the magic.
To all those old deadheads out there, listen, go and listen again to the Friday night. It's available on tape. I know. I think there's an album of it even. Of the Friday night sound check. But Watkins Glen was fabulous. There were so many great gigs during that time period, and it's lovely that the people still hold the Grateful Dead as special in their hearts, man. I do.
That's right.
I listen to the music every day, and it's been a great part of my life, and I appreciate being on your show. Love to all deadheads, wherever you might be.
You're going to be on again because now we finally got the hookup going. I want to do this again with you because we got so much more to talk about. We didn't even touch here today.
I was having a go at the guys at your end. I was saying to him, you sure the Americans went to the moon? I said, you can't even look up my telephone. I said,
and then,
sure?
What was it about a few days before that? I hit a button wrong, and you and I were talking, and you called me right back, that quick. So I couldn't. Yeah. It was a whole silly thing, but We got it right
Yeah,
now. And
funny.
thank
Yeah,
you for
babe,
your
well,
patience, brother.
anytime you want, mate. Anytime you want. I love you
Okay.
all, and it's wonderful to. You just
Yes.
took 10 years off my life.
Oh, good.
I'm
We're gonna do
younger.
this again then.
Talking
I'm
to you.
gonna put you back in the diaper.
Yeah, that's it, baby. Good on you, Steve. Love you,
I
man.
love you, brother, and we will be talking soon.
Bye,
Thank
babe.
you so much, Sam.
Out of sight.
And stay
Love you,
strong,
everyone.
brother. Stay strong.
Okay,
I
babe.
love you.
Love you.
Bye.
See you, babe. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That was great. Without further ado, let's get on to the callers that are waiting, Avery, please.